I decided to talk about food is that it draws together all of the important themes of biblical faith. It raises questions of production. Who's making the food? How's it made? It raises questions of distribution. Who's getting the food? It raises the questions of consumption. How much are we to have? It raises questions of environment. What does the raising of this food do to the earth? And I suspect that our hunger for food overlaps with our spiritual hunger. So while I am talking, since I'm going to say a number of things that over which you don't need to linger, I want you to think about one element of your breakfast or your lunch quite specifically, and be thinking about how is it produced, how is it distributed, who all got to consume it today, what did the food process of that dish do to the environment, and did that food do any good for you in terms of your spiritual hunger? I think we ought to ask that about our food every day. So the first one is I'm going to talk about the narrative of aggressive accumulation, for which the metaphor is Pharaoh. There's a big argument about whether Pharaoh was really Meneptah or Ramses II or Septos. I used to ask Pharaoh on a test. Now we don't know whether Pharaoh existed. It's so important that the Bible never tells you the name of Pharaoh. And I think that's because the Bible knows that if you've seen one Pharaoh, you've seen all Pharaohs. So in the very first chapter of Abraham and Sarah, in Genesis 12, it is reported that Abraham went down to Egypt because there was a famine, and Egypt was the breadbasket because of the Nile. Pharaoh had lots of food from the first page of the Bible. In chapter 41, Pharaoh has acute anxiety. He has a nightmare. There are two reasons you have nightmares, maybe more. One is you have a guilty conscience, or you have unfinished grace work, if you like that better. Or you ate too much. So he has a dream. He dreams of 7 fat cows being eaten up by 7 lean cows, and then he dreams about 7 good shocks of wheat being devoured by 7 blighted shocks of wheat. And he goes to his intelligence community for interpretation, and like all good intelligence communities, they can't figure it out. They missed the fall of apartheid, they missed the fall of the Soviet Union, they didn't understand his dream. So finally someone said, if you want to know about a dream, get a Jew. Freud was a Jew. Freud was a Jew, so he knew dreams. So they get Joseph and clean him up out of prison. And he hears the dream, and he says, oh, Pharaoh, you dreamed scarcity. So there's high irony in which the guy who has everything has the dream. That's how it works. The more you have, the more you're afraid of running out. So the guys at Goldman Sachs are most worried about the market collapsing. The outsiders that you've named are not worried about the market collapsing because they got much to lose. It's going to be 7 years of famine. And you dreamed scarcity out of your anxiety. And Pharaoh says, what do you think I ought to do? He says, I think you ought to appoint a food czar. You ought to get somebody who's really smart. This is all in Genesis 41.